Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at the chart of Traci Lords. Traci Lords, for those of you who are on the younger side, was an underage porn star starting from when she was 15 years old until she was 18. And then a tip caused investigators to discover that she was using a fake ID while she was participating in the adult film industry, and they subsequently destroyed all her the films that she was in when she was a minor, or they substituted scenes. And this was in a day long before the internet, when pornography was on videotapes. So that was, you would rent movies or buy them, and that was how that went down. And so I want to talk about some aspects of her life and see if I can find them in her chart. She was the victim of sexual abuse by more than one person, including a rape. And so where can we find that in the chart? She was also somebody who resurrected herself, you could call it, because when, think about the kind of bad reputation that somebody gets, like, even if, because I remember exactly when this happened. I am a couple of years older than she is, and so I remember being in my late teens, when maybe 20, when she was exposed as, being underage. And of course, even if somebody could have seen her as a victim in that sense of adults who were exploiting her, she still had this notoriety that followed her. And so it took a while for her to break into the mainstream show business industry. I read her book, which is really a good one. I recommend it, her autobiography. And it talks about how this all came about. And I'm not just talking about getting tricked into modeling, thinking it was going to be regular modeling in the ad that she answered. And this kind of stuff goes on to this day. So people get tricked into going in, and then they tell them, okay, well, we want you to actually be nude when you think you're going to do something else. And so she ended up doing what they wanted, and that's how she started going into that business. And so I want to look at that and see if there are any signs of, the kind of industry that she entered. But she did go into more mainstream movies. John Waters had her in, I believe it was Hairspray or Crybaby, one of his movies. And then I remember she was on Roseanne, the TV series, as a recurring character. That was in the 90s. And so that was how she got back into kind of you'd call it show business, but on the more PG side of the aisle. She has also married 3 times, and maybe like me looking at her relationship with the opposite sex, because of course, when you've had sexual abuse like that from more than one person, that could obviously mess with your mind and also your attitude towards men as a woman. So she's married 3 times, but apparently, according to Wikipedia, the last person that she married in 2002, and they're still together. So that's great. That's almost 20 years. So let's start at the beginning. She was born in Steubenville, Ohio. I can't remember. I haven't read her autobiography again. So, I mean, I just an excerpt from it. I believe that was an economically depressed area. I don't think she grew up with much money, but I don't recall the details. Her sun is in Taurus and her moon is in Virgo. Those are both earth signs, and she has Mercury in Gemini, Venus and Mars in Taurus, more earth, and then Libra rising. And Libra is an air sign, but it's ruled by Venus, like Taurus is, like her sun sign. So both are, you can, when you're looking at your chart, you can call your ruler both your sun and the rising sign, because they're both going to be, very important. Their rulers are very important in your life. The rising sign determines the chart ruler, which is Libra and Venus. And so people that have Venus as their ruler, so if you have Taurus rising, this would apply to you. I have Taurus rising, tend to be physically attractive. And this kind of thing, people think that being physically attractive is the end all be all, but sometimes it can be quite problematic in certain cases. And I would imagine with Traci, because she had the sun in Taurus and she had Venus and Mars in Taurus, that she may have had this appeal even from a young age that was kind of like on the earthy side of things, but also talking about it from a materialistic standpoint. Because when you're Venus ruled, I think the love of luxury can really be front and center. And so this is another reason why, if somebody is faced in the kind of situation she was, where she thought she was going in to do one thing in terms of modeling, and then they wanted her to be nude, and then she agreed to do it. I can't remember if it was just provocative at first and then it kind of escalated. But in any case, yeah, I think it was pretty explicit, because these were not videos at first. These were like for print magazines. So, the X-rated magazines. So for some other people, they'd say, no, I don't want to do that. But because maybe she was wanting that money, and that was really important to her, that was a motivating factor. So it's important to emphasize the fact that she did not go into this with that intention to pose nude. But she, decided to go along with it. One of the things that you could say with somebody who has Libra rising, and I would say even with the Taurus energy to some extent, although Taurus is a fixed sign, so there can be an obstinate nature. The person can be quite stubborn and fixed in their, set in their ways. But Libra is a sign that, can see all sides of an issue. And, by the way, is highly intelligent. And that's one of the things that struck me when I read her book. I really felt like she was not only that she was very savvy, and that she had a lot of common sense, but also that she had a lot of innate intelligence. You can be somebody who's very intelligent and be, quite foolish. And some people are, they have common sense, but they're not really, their mind isn't really that sharp. And I think that hers was. And I think that's why she was able to reinvent herself. And if you look at her eighth house, which is the house of transformation, she has 3 personal planets. She has the Sun, Mercury, and Mars. Her Mercury is actually in Gemini, and her Sun and Mars are in Taurus, but in the same 8th house. So this can definitely indicate someone like the phoenix rising from the ashes, the cat with 9 lives that is never down and totally out. Don't count this person out. So I have the sun here, and that will give some of those themes life within the person's reality, just because the sun is a central theme. But then you add Mercury and Mars, and Mercury can mean that the person has a very good grasp of human nature. I mean, I say this a lot. If you look at these placements, especially if we're talking about personal planets in their signs, just in general, they can be interchangeable to some degree, where you will see the same themes presenting themselves, maybe slightly different, but also with the house placements. So if you have several planets in one house, yeah, I mean, the sun can be the comeback kid, or the person who, has different phases of their life or seasons of their life where they change, maybe radically change. And because the sun is the identity, this can even be how they view themselves. But other people can be like, gosh, I didn't even know that, you were you, because you used to look a lot different. You used to act a lot different. You used to have a totally different profession. So these kinds of things. But even with the sun, that can indicate somebody who is very good at perceiving psychology, human nature. But when you add Mercury, you're talking about that analytical skill. So that is really going to enhance that. And I think also psychically, because this is a water house, that could also play into the person's perceptive abilities, that they are very, intuitive. And then Mars here can indicate someone who may have been even at the point of life and death. I don't know if Mars would indicate that, or Pluto. Pluto and Mars rule this house in astrology under the sign of Scorpio. So it was very interesting when I pulled up her chart, because I was just, I totally expected to find Scorpio somewhere here, but not in her personal points. The only Scorpio that is here is Neptune in Scorpio. Oh, wait a second. Let's see here. Yeah, so then what you look at is you look at the 8th house, and then that can give you that flavor. But also the conjunctions or aspects to Pluto. She has a trine from the sun to Pluto, which is very harmonious for a sense of personal power. So even somebody who's victimized by rape like she was, or sexual abuse, which, all of those terms, if you are molested by an adult, but somebody doesn't just pin you down, but maybe they groom you, is that different than rape? It's all semantics to me. Sexual abuse, some people, they just are destroyed by it, and it's very hard for them to Maybe they become drug addicts, alcoholics, and that plagues the rest of their life. She did abuse drugs, but I believe she got sober when she left the industry at 18. So she was doing drugs during that time that she was in the adult film business. So she's got a conjunction between the moon and Pluto, which I have as well. And this is, when you don't have personal planets in Scorpio, this is the next best thing. Trust me. So that is another indication of somebody who feels things very deeply. She and I both have the moon in Virgo. So that's going to tend to be dry in and of itself. But when you have these aspects to Pluto, that makes things a little bit more emotional. And I'm not, bringing myself up here in a gratuitous fashion. I'm just saying that I can vouch for this because I have it. And yeah, so she has, I'm going to see here, and a trine from Mars to Pluto, which is good because that can be part of that reinventing oneself, is that the actions which Mars represents can be constructive, which the trine can represent, to Pluto, where it's like it's leading to that person's self-empowerment. It's not leading them to ruin. Where I see a definite pattern of hard angles is with her Neptune. She has an opposition from the Sun to Neptune, an opposition from Mercury to Neptune, an opposition from Mars to Neptune, and a square from Jupiter to Neptune. Neptune is the ruler of Pisces, and it's the planet of, we could say, merging with God's source energy in, transcendence in the positive way of looking at it. In the challenging way of looking at it, it is escapism, it is victimhood, it is delusion or deception. So meaning that somebody is being lied to by somebody else and they're also lying to themselves, perhaps. So her opposition between the Sun and Neptune can be putting her sense of identity in the hands of someone else. This happens, let me see where this is falling. Neptune is in the second house of earned income. So, in that particular case, in terms of how the person is making money, I mean, just looking at the Neptune part of it, Neptune rules photography, so you could say video by association. And so that could be somebody who works in the film industry. Obviously, it doesn't have to be adult films, and she did do other types of movies as well as TV. And there's when the sun is coming from the 8th house, this is classic for something like pornography, which, I believe can be the 8th house pornography, because it's sex. The 8th house can be sex, but it's also taboo. And there can be this shadow aspect of it. A lot of times people don't realize that you can be against something like pornography and not make it a moral issue, not be moralistic about it and say, that's, against God's teachings or whatever. But just in terms of, how is this industry, how do they get people Do they get people who are whole, who are, emotionally healed, or is the industry full of people who have been abused? Are they acting out their own sexual abuse, hoping to gain some kind of power from that reenactment because they're getting money? And that gives them this sense of power, even though they're probably re-traumatizing themselves all the time with the kind of things that they're doing. You know what I mean? And even the people who watch it, they can have been victims of sexual abuse or other types of abuse too. So it can work both ways, and it can be a very, I feel like it can have a lot of dark energy attached to it. And I know that there are people who, like specifically women, who claim that they are, not that way, and that they are like empowering themselves through it and stuff. And that, I can't judge other people and what their motivations are, but I'm just saying that our society tells us, oh, that's okay if you're a consenting adult and all of that. And it's not that simple. It isn't just about being a consenting adult. It's like, what is going on? How is this affecting people energetically? And so for her to have the sun in the 8th house and then opposing that Neptune in the 2nd, it can be to me that it's a way that she's trying to, or that she did. I'm not saying she's doing that now, but the way that she was trying to kind of project all of that shadow stuff onto the way that she makes money. And yes, I think that there is a healing aspect to that for sure, because the person does feel more in control of their life. The problem is that the environment is not wholesome, and so it's not uncommon for there to be a lot of addiction, so a lot of drugs, alcohol, like maybe a lot of numbing oneself, because it is maybe hard to do that kind of work. And so anything that can take them out of themselves, they're going to use. So it's like the environment might be very difficult. But so the 2nd house might be the way that you earn money. And with Neptune, it can be through film. Or fantasy. That's another big word with Neptune. So, the opposition of Mercury to Neptune, like the square, it can be this being in denial over reality. Now, reality is relative, that's for sure. And we could say that we create our own reality, that we're living in our own world, simply because we're an individual and we have our own frame of reference. And when people, I think a lot of us have had an experience dealing with someone where we would talk to them and they would not hear what we were saying. Maybe they distorted it somehow. Mercury in hard angle to Neptune can indicate distortions of the mind. So the person, starting from a young age maybe, they have perceived things erroneously, half-assed. There's been some kind of garbling of the way that information is perceived and decoded and all of that stuff. I believe this is a protective device that began when the child was young and dealing with traumatic situations growing up. And it allows the child to kind of substitute what is really going on with an idealized version of what is going on. And so these oppositions, because she has several of these oppositions, they can really come alive during relationships because the person is wanting one thing and getting another, wanting one reality that isn't reality and getting something else, and maybe putting on those rose-colored glasses and perceiving it in the way that they want to perceive it. And the other thing is an opposition between Mars and Neptune. Interestingly, hard angles from Mars to Neptune can be addiction to pornography, or I would say an addiction to sex altogether. And certainly some people who end up in these kinds of sex-related industries, they may have that kind of compulsive behavior towards sex, and they just decide, hey, I might as well make a living doing this if I'm going to be doing it for free anyway. But really what it is, when we think about Mars and the drive of Mars, by the way, Mars can be the sex drive, but I'm not speaking of it in terms of that. I'm just talking about the person who wants to do anything. They can do it with this very, like what I would call an overly idealistic kind of a fervor. And it's like Neptune can represent transcendence, but that illusion of transcendence as well. The person who's looking, some people who are drug addicts are looking for the perfect high. They're looking for the perfect feeling that takes them away from their pain. Neptune can be addiction. So when somebody has Mars in aspect to Neptune, watch out for addictive tendencies, because in some cases, the person is trying to control how much they're using. And the problem with that is that that's not the only factor. Someone might not be addicted to something, but they're using it excessively. Or whatever it is that they're using is very dangerous. And even if they're dabbling in it, it is very, toxic to the body, and the person could easily die accidentally. So it's really what you're doing and how it's affecting you. And so in this case, is the thing that she was pursuing, was that something that was real, or did it turn out to be deceptive? This happens a lot with a person's ambition. They're going after something and they're very invested in it for obvious reasons. And, maybe it does end up not working for them, but the resting phase, if somebody gets into that type of thing, it might be because they're not meant to do whatever that thing is. They're interested in something else. And pursuing a fantasy doesn't work out. So you might see someone who's chasing their tail a lot. And so in this case, Traci, it's hard to say because I don't think she quit. She quit the business herself. As I recall, it was because, they just found out about it and then they shut it down. and said, you can't be doing this. And then but there was like I think she was ready to leave, and she was, she got clean and sober. After that, it was like her out. It was her ability to do that. But it took these other things happening to make that happen. Mars is making something happen. So when you have a hard angle to Mars from another planet, that means that whatever it is that you're pursuing, like an opposition in this case, you may be projecting onto that thing. So it might be a false type of thing that you're motivated by. And and like for instance, again, Neptune being in that second house, maybe it was like her feeling that, hey, this is going to make me happy if I do this thing, and then it didn't work out that way. So Neptune can make a person very idealistic and imaginative, but also easily disillusioned. I also think having Neptune in the second house can lend itself to a person who is looking for kind of an easy way to make money. Of course, you could say Venus might be that, but I think like with Neptune, it's like almost like scheming, get rich quick. Something where the person is able to just kind of manifest. And this might actually be good with manifestation in terms of that spiritual component, because Neptune is spiritual. But in terms of everything else, at the very least, the person may earn their living through doing something that is fictitious and an illusion. Maybe one that is being cultivated, an illusion that's being cultivated, but an illusion nonetheless. That's how the person is earning money. And when somebody has Neptune in the second house, they have to watch out for financial exploitation, because this can mean that the person is easily misled, that they're gullible when it comes to money. And that's with the get rich quick. I think that is a perfect example of that, where the person is attracted to these schemes, but the schemes actually turn against them. They're actually ways to get money from them. And that's why, and I say the same thing with Pluto in the second house, is like, when you're looking for money, you have to be above board, or otherwise it's kind of almost like karmic bitch slap with these planets. If you don't fly right, it can be easier to have the boomerang effect. And Neptune in the second house, I have a video of Neptune in the second house. If you happen to have it in your natal chart, you might want to listen to that one, because, well, this is just an example, but on the thumbnail, I have a picture of Buddhist monks with a begging bowl. And that is meant to depict people that they have an attitude about money where it's like they believe that the universe will provide for them. And this is kind of, there's also that tradition with Christianity, with monks and nuns, where they're not going out and getting a paycheck every week. They work for the church. You could say they work for the church, but the church doesn't cut them out paychecks either, I don't think. But they do take a vow of poverty, maybe. I don't know if they do that these days, but at least they might not be allowed to make money outside of the church. That's what I always assumed. And the whole purpose of that is to train them to depend on God and not depend on man to cut a paycheck. Now, we could argue and say, oh, yeah, that's the cover story, but really they are trying to get them dependent on the church so that they'll be, there forever as long as they live. But if we look at it at the higher level, that's what it's really about. And so a person who has Neptune in the second house may not really fear their money situation because they know that they'll get what they need when they need it. And that's why I think I said law of attraction. I meant that the person has this intuitive grasp of money and being able to fund their life, and even if it's just hanging by a thread, they still are able to do everything they need to do. Interestingly, Traci has Chiron in the sixth house of work. And of course, she experienced woundedness, pain, because of that decision that she made to do what she did. And that ended up defining her for a long time. And yet, that was the very thing that healed her. It's really touchy and difficult to talk about the types of abuse that somebody goes through and whether or not at a higher level they chose to have that experience, because we never want to excuse abuse of any kind. But if we do say that theory is true, it doesn't mean that the other person is not should not be held accountable for what they did. I mean, that is all part of it. If somebody has some kind of soul contract with somebody else, that means that both of them are going to have to experience the consequences of the thing that they are involved in. And it also gives the opportunity for the person who has been abused to rise from that circumstance and transcend it. Doesn't mean minimize it, pretend it didn't happen, but to not allow that to define who they are for the rest of their life. And that is one of the things that I admire about Traci, is that she was able to get past it. It's a different time now. Back in the 80s, which almost sounds a little bit, odd, because the 80s weren't straight-laced, but they did have the moral majority. They were really trying to, maybe it was a last gasp of moralism, of trying to shame people for these kinds of things. But I remember in 1984, I believe it was, when the woman who was crowned Miss America, they found out that she had posed nude, and she ended up having to step down. And it's inconceivable now that was such a scandal then. It might have been part of the rules. I don't know, that you did not, you should not have been in any kind of pornographic magazine or whatever you want to call it. But still, I mean, even to have that kind of rule, if they did, seems now like very much ado about nothing. But yeah, it was a big deal. So the same thing applied to Traci. I'm trying to remember if people blamed Traci for it. I think a lot of people understood the circumstances, but she definitely was not regarded as a wholesome person. And actually, it's very interesting because even looking at Traci, maybe it was because of the time that she was in. I'm talking about when she was still in those films, and there's a hardness that develops. Maybe it has to do too with using drugs. The kind of makeup, maybe they wear excessive makeup and they're trying to look hard. I think she did kind of soften her image later on. What I really was have admired about her when I read her book was how she seemed to be very able to like move forward, always progressing. And the reason that I think this happened that way is that I feel like with the Taurus energy, even though sometimes that can lead to stagnation, inertia, I feel like it is a very persistent kind of energy. And that means that if the person gets knocked down, they're not down for the count. They're going to keep going. And because it's Earth, I feel that it's and by the way, air and earth, because her rising sign is Libra and she has a moon in Virgo, um, they are more detached emotionally than the fire and the water. So this can be good for a person who does go through trauma to not let it affect them that much. Now, obviously, if somebody doesn't deal with trauma and they act like it's not really affecting them, that's not necessarily a good thing either, because that means that they could be in denial over it. And eventually, that person will probably have to face it and grieve it and integrate it. But it's helpful, like when somebody's trying to achieve their goals, because they are able to function better. Sometimes when people can't function, it's because their emotions are paralyzing them to do anything physically. And it probably has something to do with the nervous system not working properly as well, getting riled up. And something that is, and by the way, talking about Chiron in the sixth house, it's also in Aries. I already told you she has an opposition from the Sun to Neptune, so that adds to the confusion of identity. And I think when somebody has gone through that kind of sexual trauma that she did, the main identity that the person has to fight against is whether or not that is who they are, that they are a sex object. And this is unfortunately what a trap that abused women, sexually abused women, can fall into, is believing that that is who they are, is that they are meant to maybe be a temptress to men. And they see themselves that way because they feel like, hey, I'm attracting this attention, sexual attention, maybe from a young age from the opposite sex. Maybe this is, what I'm meant to do is to be this thing. And, it's one of those, in Traci's case, again, she got tricked into this. And it's very difficult to say that she chose it, even if she could have backed down after they told her what they wanted her to do. They had that lure of money. And by the way, I believe she had just gotten an abortion at the time that she went into that, whatever you want to call it, where that audition or that interview for the pornography job, the print pornography job. And I believe she was 15 at the time. So you can imagine that she was probably in a very vulnerable state. And I think she needed the money. I don't know if, how that abortion was paid for, but there was some reason that she was really trying to earn this money. Chiron in Aries or Chiron in the first house can be the pain of not feeling like you can be who you truly are. Like other people are rejecting your version of yourself that you feel is the authentic version. So sometimes people may feel like they have to be fake in order to be accepted. But this is like the opposite of that. It's like the pain of being something that you're not really, because you feel that this is the way that life has gone, and so you might as well just embrace it. But it really wasn't who she was. She wasn't, born to be a porn star. Maybe some people are, I don't know, or to be in adult movies. Maybe some people are. But she obviously, once she turned 18, she could have stayed doing that. But she decided that she didn't want to be a participant of that. It's very interesting that the bottom half of the chart, the first 6 houses, are barely populated, and the 7th through 12th houses are where most of the planets are. What this means, the 7th through 12th houses are us plus other people. Although I never, with the 12th house, I'm always like, what does that have to do with other people? It seems like, we're in solitude. But, if you're in a monastery, there are other people there. You're just not talking to them. But anyway, I think that a person who is interested in being a performer and who might be more extroverted would have this combination. And speaking of that, like in her 7th house of committed partnership, public relations, and legal matters, she has Venus, she has Saturn, and she has the North Node. So she has both Chiron and the North Node in Aries. So the very thing that brings her pain, that sense of self, is also her destiny and her soul's mission. Maybe it is development of the self. When people have the North Node in the 7th house, it's not, crazy to think that at some point that they may marry someone or couple with someone that is their soulmate or life partner. Now, she has been, I said earlier that she has been with her husband for over 20 years. And she had married 2 times before that. So, at that point, if she's been with somebody for over 20 years, she was young. She must have been pretty young when she got married the first 2 times. Interestingly, that we're talking about marriage. So marriage apparently is important to her. And this is not uncommon for Taurus people, because Taurus, as a fixed sign and as the ruler of the 2nd house of possessions, may actually get possessive over their partner, and perhaps having that ring or having that legal document makes them feel more secure about their status with that other person. They may be more traditional and may think that that is the proper route to go. And Saturn here can indicate that there are delays in the marital partner. So, well, one thing that, without knowing the first time how old she was the first time she got married, chances are she might have been fairly young, and she may have even used um, marriage to get out of the house, or she might have married an older person. Saturn can be represent age. It's father time. So if anybody listening to this has Saturn in the seventh house, that may have happened to you. You may have gotten married young, and maybe this wasn't the right person for you. It doesn't mean that in all cases it wasn't the right person, but sometimes it can be one of those May December romances, and that the person's actually marrying for financial security, so that they can have nice things. Or, well, it's not just about nice things, it's actually about having a sense of security. If they have come from a home life that has been very chaotic, or maybe financially deprived, that they find someone who is older, more mature, more established. And I read somewhere where they said, if you have Saturn the seventh, to wait until your second Saturn return to get married, and that's around the age of 30, because otherwise it'll be premature and it won't work. I mean, I don't know if they put it that absolutely, but in any case, certainly with her, it didn't work with the first two men. So I was hoping that she was still married to this guy when I was checking this up the other day. And yes, I mean, I think that was the guy that I read about in the book that she, was involved with, that she's still with that person. Venus here can be the person who wants to have a partner who is, maybe you could say, their best friend, who they do everything with. And, when somebody has that attitude towards marriage, that's good, because that means that they have a positive attitude, that they're seeing, and, looking at marriage, more than just this kind of these roles that people are playing out, but really taking pleasure in it. Venus can be about pleasure, and also the romantic aspect. But not, to me, it's not just a romantic thing where it's just kind of symbolic. It's really wanting to be, with your partner and feeling that sense of togetherness, maybe. In the 11th house of friendships and groups, and I do believe that the internet can be part of this house. I used to say that all the time, and then somebody said no. Mentioning other things that are connected to the internet. The internet, I've heard astrologers say the third house, because it's a house of communication. But the 11th house is the house of technology. So I know that I'm not imagining things. I just can't find it where they mention the internet in the 11th house. And it's really the collective. That's what the 11th house is. So you if somebody has the moon here, like Traci has the moon and Jupiter here, and that can mean that she's popular. Jupiter in the 11th house can mean that the person has a lot of friends, or, because Jupiter is very expansive. maybe they have a lot of friends, or that they are helped by their friends. And that's certainly, a possibility. The people that they have come in contact with. And the moon here can indicate friendships with women. Now, that's an interesting thing too, because I think, Traci has a lot of feminine energy. The Taurus, the earth, and the water are feminine signs. And so I think that it makes sense that somebody like that would have a lot of female friends. But the thing that's interesting about it is that sometimes women have been conditioned to see other women as their rivals fighting for men. So a woman in that line of work, you might think, wouldn't have a lot of female companions, because they might feel that, maybe the women are threatened by them and saying, you're going to steal my man because you used to be a porn star. But a woman who has the moon in the 11th house can be, maybe adept at cultivating relationships with women and caring about these women. And I think that that's something too, that women who have been through this kind of ordeal may take refuge in each other. So there's always the danger. I think sometimes I've said this before, even in private readings, when you're a woman with the moon in the 11th house, make sure that when you are cultivating relationships with fellow women, that you're not using some sort of anti-men type of mentality to kind of bond together, because I could see like the women who are joining forces, and they're kind of, it's like being a woman is part of that. Of course, that can even be, sometimes there are, I know this is crazy. I was going to say, like in the New Age community, they'll have things where they'll say like the goddess circle. I went to a cacao ceremony where it was just for women, and I didn't like it. They have full moon ceremonies just for women. And I said to this one person that was hosting one of those full moon ceremonies, why do you need a vagina to join this thing? And it's maybe that's a bit rude to say something like that. But the thing is that when women indulge in that kind of thing, I realize it probably has something to do with being victimized by men and feeling unsafe with men. But I think that it reinforces this dichotomy between men and women when we make something gender specific like that. Talking about a safe space for women. Well, if you're actively pursuing that, that means that you have this view of men as dangerous. You don't want to perpetuate that. And so maybe I really probably should have reread her autobiography before I did this, so I wouldn't have to be so, maybe she did this, kind of vague about that, but that's something that she may have, like a solid network support group. No, I was going to say support network of female friends that she can turn to. Or like even just, maybe they're not like close friends, but just some sort of support group of women in general. In the 12th house, she has Uranus and Pluto here, and that is interesting because with the Pluto, that can indicate trauma. That can mean that, and this could be like very deeply buried trauma that the person has no way of accessing, but in some cases, they may feel that they are being controlled by that thing, by that trauma. And I have heard people say that's why they were going to go to an ayahuasca ceremony because they wanted to, heal from trauma that they can't access on the conscious level. And that's something that, that's a choice or a decision that everybody has to make, but they should definitely do their research to make sure that they know what the potential risks are too, because there are other ways of releasing trauma without having to do something that might be rather, in some cases it could be destabilizing for someone who has repressed a memory. That's what I would imagine. I don't know, but I think that the reason I'm saying this so cautiously is I don't want people to think that I'm just kind of endorsing that, because I haven't done anything like that. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because the 12th house can be drugs, and I feel like anything that is used for spiritual purposes too, to kind of go into a mystical state, or to, in this case, uncover repressed memories, to be able to bring them up to heal. Uranus in the 12th house can be the closeted freak, meaning that the person is really a nonconformist, but they're afraid to be. I think with a lot of Taurus energy, like she has, I could totally see. I think of Taurus as a traditional sign, and so I don't see Taurus people as necessarily wanting to kind of buck the tide, or whatever the saying goes. I feel like Taurus is more wanting to go with the flow than anything else. And this is, I feel like if somebody wants to be an artist or like an energy healer, Uranus in the 12th house make them fear doing something that they think other people would see as, strange. And, sometimes we have to face those kind of judgments. Again, with Chiron and Aries, that is being true to oneself, being authentic, knowing who you are. So it's very difficult to do those things when you don't know who you are. And so that was probably something that Traci had to work with, or has had to work with for many years, to get to a place where she can really feel like she knows herself and that she values herself. I find it interesting that I believe her real first name is Norma, and that was the first name of Marilyn Monroe, Norma Jean. So Traci was a name that she really loved, that she wanted, growing up. So that's how she was, going to show up in the world, and as this name that really resonated with her. And, drawing parallels with Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe did not live past her early 30s, or past her mid 30s. She might have been 35, I don't remember, but she was very young. She died prematurely. Traci Lords was able to get past that period in her life when there was a lot of blowback and chaos around her. So, she weathered the storm for sure. And yeah, the 12th house is karmic, so they say when there are planets in the natal chart in the 12th house that it's unfinished business. And certainly I could see that she had to go through a little bit more because she was pretty young when she went through all of this, very young. And then she was able to kind of put it behind her. So that's what I have, and I hope that maybe there are a few people that actually sat through this whole thing and listened. But in any case, I do personal astrological readings, and you can find out more information at the link below. Thanks for listening. Bye.